myself down a lot. Because I didn't want to seem like I was cocky or arrogant or smarter than everybody. And then, told me my whole life.
By this time, were you already into the rap?
That's probably when I'm jumping into it.
Every time we pick these niggas up, they go to trial, beat the shit. Witnesses don't come to trial. You know what I'm saying? Recant, they stay, all type of shit. So I think it was just more of a just like, man, listen, whatever y'all can get them niggas on, come pick them niggas up. I did 9 years in the feds, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like the niggas that I met in there and the conversations that I had in there, it's like, man, y'all wouldn't. You know what I mean? Like we wasn't on shit.
This is Kevon Biffford, a 27-year-old Kansas City rapper known to the streets as Two Gun Kevy, who would be found dead in a pickup truck at a car wash on May 2024. He survived 9 years in federal prison, won awards, and collaborated with legends, but he couldn't survive snitching. On that Friday evening, around 6:30, patrolling officers heard multiple gunshots echoing through the east side of Kansas City. They were directed by witnesses to a nearby car wash where they discovered something that would become the city's 57th homicide of the year. But before we get to that fatal moment, let me take you back to the 1980s where this story really began. We're talking about a rapper who won Best Male Rap Artist at the 2021 Kansas City People's Choice Awards, who collaborated with Tech N9ne, who had a track called Vent that surpassed 1 million views. Born in the 1980s to a teenage mother in Kansas City, Missouri, Kevon entered the streets at 15 or 16 years old, a kid raised in an environment where survival meant adaptation, where the sound of gunfire became as familiar as radio tracks. He started rapping in 2003, initially just messing around with his cousin in his aunt's basement, using a Fisher-Price recorder like so many hood dreams begin.
And a shout out to Max Fast for making this shit happen. It's way bigger than rapping. This used to be the mob. It's bigger than them clap outs. Niggas that really died. Thought that I was going, my nigga, I swear to God. And when they hit that close to home, I broke down and I cried.
But we was on that shit every day, rapping.
Kind of shoot me into that real quick. So when did you kind of start?
Probably when we was like 10, 11, you know what I'm saying? When we got that little, that Fisher-Price recorder, you know what I'm saying? And we was just fucking around, bro. But you know how that shit go. When you fucking around with that shit, man, it get addictive.
But Kansas City's east side in the 2000s wasn't just a place to dream, it was a place to survive. And Kevon's survival meant affiliation. He became connected with the Click Clack Gang, a criminal street organization that took its name from the mechanical sound of chambering around in a semi-automatic handgun. That distinctive sound, click-clack, became linked with a crew involved in crack cocaine distribution, firearms trafficking, and the kind of violence that federal prosecutors describe with words like racketeering and enterprise. Federal authorities identified the Click Clack Gang as a criminal street organization with at least 5 members engaged in drug trafficking and violence, the kind of operation that draws the attention of agencies with 3-letter acronyms and budgets for lengthy investigations.
Took too many L's, we slept in way too many jails. Be a cold day in hell before one of these niggas tell like I think.
The first major crack in Kevon's armor came in 2007. A nightclub shooting. He was involved in a nightclub shooting and was identified through surveillance footage. Biffford was arrested for second-degree murder, facing the kind of charges that could bury a 20-something rapper before he ever had a chance to blow. But here's where the whispers of being a snitch began. Kevon pleaded guilty to a reduced charge, unlawful use of a firearm, and received 3 years of probation with a 15-year suspended sentence. His co-defendant, Richard Cooper, wasn't so lucky. Cooper received a life sentence. The math is simple. One person walks away with probation, another gets life. And the question becomes, what did the first person give up to earn that difference? Associates claimed Biffford provided police with a description of a shooter, details about a chop with a banana clip, and somebody with dreadlocks, specific enough to be useful. Then came 2008. Shortly after visiting Richard Cooper in jail, Kevon Biffford was shot in the mouth. But Kevon survived, and when investigators pressed him for information about who pulled the trigger, about who wanted him dead, Biffford made a statement that was supposed to clear his name once and for all. Even if I knew who shot me, I would not prosecute because I am not a snitch or a rat. If you wouldn't snitch about your own shooter, why did you describe a shooter in someone else's case? The math wasn't adding up, and in the streets, when the math doesn't add up, people start subtracting. Between 2009 and 2011, Kevon Biffford was arrested 8 more times, each incident involving drugs and firearms. And when you're making local police look ineffective, witnesses don't show up to testify. Cases keep getting dismissed or beaten at trial. The feds get involved. And when they do, they don't just charge you with what you did last Tuesday, they charge you with everything you've done since you learned to tie your shoes. On February 10, 2011, a federal grand jury unsealed an indictment that would reshape Kansas City's hip-hop landscape. Kevon and 6 co-defendants, including his own brother, Kevin Levance Jackson, were charged with a 12-count conspiracy under federal drug and firearm statutes. But this wasn't just another drug case. Prosecutors invoked 18 U.S.C. Section 521, seeking gang enhancements that could add up to 10 years per count, treating the Click Clack gang as a criminal enterprise engaged in racketeering-like activities. The charges against Kevon were conspiracy to distribute 28 grams or more of crack cocaine, possession with intent to distribute, felon in possession of firearm, possessing firearms in furtherance of drug trafficking, and distribution of cocaine. And they had evidence of over 20 firearms recovered from various incidents, more than 40 grams of crack cocaine, over 100 grams of powder cocaine, marijuana, ecstasy, and nearly $2,500 in cash. Several of those firearms were stolen or illegally modified. Some were tied to shootings and at least one unsolved homicide. Kevon received a 12-year federal sentence. But here's where the math gets interesting again, where those snitching allegations gain more fuel. Kevon served only 9 years of that 12-year sentence, benefiting from retroactive sentencing reforms like the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010 and the First Step Act of 2018, which reduced the disparities between crack and powder cocaine penalties.
9 years in the feds, bro, you know what I'm saying? Like, the niggas that I met in there and the conversations that I had in there, it's like, man, y'all would, you know what I mean? Like, we wasn't on shit, you know?
Now, to be fair, these reforms helped thousands of nonviolent drug offenders across the country. Good behavior credits contributed to early releases. This wasn't necessarily evidence of cooperation. It was evidence of changing laws and policies. But in the streets, where perception is reality and rumors spread faster than facts, people started doing their own math. While Kevon walked out in March 2020, other co-defendants were still serving time, still fighting cases, still buried in the system. But let's talk about what those 9 years actually did to Kevon Biffford, the person, not just Two Gun Kevy, the rapper. In interviews after his release, he spoke with raw honesty about how incarceration affected his relationship with his children.
You know what I'm saying? Like I was telling you earlier, like when you get outside of, you know what I'm saying, where we at, you know what I'm saying, then you start thinking about, you know what I'm saying, other attributes or other things. I can't really give it, I can't, this is what I can't say, you know what I'm saying? And the reason why I can't say is because my maturity level at the time was nowhere close to where it is now, you know what I'm saying?
You know, being going away, you know, for so long, being a father, like how was that standpoint in your life, not being able to see your kids? I'm not pretty sure you probably have seen them, but not being able to be outside physically.
Nah, yeah. It affected a lot, you know what I'm saying? I don't, not to take nothing from my kids. Like, my kids is cool, you know what I'm saying?
When Kevon walked out of federal prison in March 2020, he emerged into a world transformed by the COVID-19 pandemic. He released Vent, a track that would surpass 1 million views, pouring 9 years of pain and growth and reflection into bars that resonated with people who understood that kind of journey. He started collaborating with Kansas City heavyweights like Tech 9, Studio B, Sully 4, and Walter Edwin. And then came the recognition. In 2021, Kevon won Best Male Rap Artist at the 2021 Kansas City People's Choice Awards, who collaborated with Tech 9, who had a track called Vent that surpassed 1 million views. He focused on family. He left behind parents, 6 siblings, 3 children before prison, and that newborn that represented everything he was trying to build. He talked about entrepreneurship, about building something sustainable, about being a trendsetter who represented Kansas City with pride while actively distancing himself from gang life. This was supposed to be the redemption arc, but the streets didn't care. On May 24, 2024, 6:30 in the evening, Friday night in Kansas City, Missouri, Kevon Biffford was near the exit ramp from eastbound Interstate 70 onto Van Brunt Boulevard in the east side of the city when someone decided his redemption story needed a different ending. Patrolling police officers heard the unmistakable sound of gunshots, multiple rounds fired in quick succession. Witnesses directed officers to a nearby car wash where they discovered something that would become the city's 57th homicide of the year. But Biffford was found in his pickup truck, unresponsive with multiple gunshot wounds tearing through his body. Police believe the actual shooting occurred on or near the exit ramp and that Kevon, in his final moments, managed to drive his truck a short distance before it rolled into that car wash parking lot. Emergency medical personnel attempted life-saving measures right there on the scene, but it was too late. Kevon Darnell Biffford, the rapper known as Two Gun Kevy, was pronounced dead at the car wash. This became Kansas City's 57th homicide of 2024, a grim statistic in a city struggling with elevated violence, where the sound of gunfire has become so common that only the body count makes the news. Police treat his death as a homicide, potentially linked to gang rivalries, but they haven't released specific details about motive or suspects. The investigation remains open. No suspects have been identified and no arrests have been made. The Kansas City Police Department is seeking witnesses, surveillance footage, any other piece of information that might solve this case. So what really happened? Why was Kevon Biffford killed on that Friday evening in May? Street narratives, amplified on platforms like TikTok and YouTube, attribute his death to those snitching allegations, to perceived betrayals that happened over a decade ago. Some believe it was retaliation from click-clack gang members or rivals who never forgot, never forgave. Others think it was connected to more recent conflicts, to the reality that when you're a visible figure in the rap game with a past in the streets, you become a target regardless of whether you're still active in that life. The brutal truth is that evidence leans towards Kevon's death being connected to street conflicts rather than immediate post-release retaliation, but the topic remains speculative and heavily debated in local hip-hop circles. What we know for certain is that a man who survived being shot in the mouth, who survived 9 years in federal prison, who won awards and created art and tried to build something different for his children, still couldn't escape the gravitational pull of the streets he came from.
Kevon's funeral became a moment for the community to reflect on the persistent dangers facing those transitioning from street affiliations. Friends spoke about him as a dedicated father, as a trendsetter, as someone who represented the 816 area code with pride. They urged others to learn from his story, to escape the cycles of violence before it's too late. But even in death, even in mourning, those snitching allegations continued to swirl, continued to shape the narrative, continued to divide opinion about whether Kevon Biffford was a victim or whether he somehow earned his fate. Walter Edwin, a fellow Kansas City artist who collaborated with Kevon, captured something essential about his legacy, that regardless of how Kevon died or why, he inspired people to pursue their dreams, to believe that the hood doesn't have to be a life sentence. Kevon's track vent continues to accumulate views. The surveillance footage, if it exists, hasn't led to any public breaks in the case. The $25,000 reward for whoever helps identify the shooter sits unclaimed. But the silence surrounding Kevon's killing doesn't just feel like a lack of evidence. It feels like a wall built out of fear, loyalty, survival, and the unspoken rules that govern neighborhoods like Kansas City's East Side. Detectives have said publicly that they believe people know more than they're willing to share, and that solving this case might depend less on forensics and more on someone finally deciding that the cost of silence is too high. Meanwhile, the community continues to wrestle with the weight of the loss. In the weeks following Kevon's death, vigils were held at the very car wash where his truck came to its final stop.
Candles melted into the concrete, posters and handwritten notes, "Long live Two Gun, Kevy forever, you broke the cycle for us."
Many L's, we slept in way too many jails. Be a cold day in hell before one of these niggas tell like
Stories, each one painting a slightly different version of the man behind the music. Some remembered him as the kid who always cracked jokes in the neighborhood. Others spoke of the older Kevon, who tried to mentor young rappers so they wouldn't repeat his mistakes. Online, though, the conversation shifted into something messier. Comment sections became battlegrounds where fans defended his attempts to change, while others pushed narratives based on rumors from old court documents, street gossip, or half-understood legal outcomes. People debated whether his past ever truly let him go, or whether the city itself traps people in stories they can't rewrite. But no matter which side people took, the sheer volume of discussion revealed something undeniable. Kevon's life and death struck a nerve far beyond Kansas City. At the same time, local organizations that worked to reduce violence used Kevon's death as a rallying point. Community leaders argued that his story shows the impossible tightrope many formerly incarcerated people walk, the way they can be celebrated for growth and still be pulled back by old attachments, old perceptions, or old conflicts they didn't even know were still active. Several speakers at his memorial called for more resources for people returning from prison, more protection for artists who become visible targets, and more opportunities for young men before their names ever appear in a court document. Yet, even with all the conversations his death sparked, the case itself remains frozen. Police continue to ask for tips, journalists occasionally revisit the story, the reward sits untouched. And somewhere out there, someone still holds the missing pieces, the few details that could transform this unresolved tragedy into a solved case. Whether they ever come forward may determine if Kevon Bifford's story ends with justice. But before you scroll away, before the algorithm carries you to the next tragedy, the next viral headline, sit with this for a moment. Because stories like Kevon's don't really end at the crime scene chalk line. They keep echoing. In the music he left behind, in the children who will grow up hearing pieces of their father from other people's memories, in a community that keeps asking itself why the cycle never seems to break. Every time a case like this goes unsolved, it chips away at people's sense of safety, at their belief that justice is something reachable, not theoretical. It reinforces a silence woven into neighborhoods like Kansas City's East Side, where people grow up learning what to say, what not to say, and when to simply look away. And yet, even with all the rumors swirling online, even with think pieces and reaction videos dissecting his past, there's another part of Kevon's story that rarely trends. The part where a man genuinely tried to reroute his life after 9 years behind bars, where he collaborated with artists who believed in him, where he spoke openly about wanting to change, about wanting to be present for his children, about wanting to outgrow the life he once embraced. But redemption takes time, and time is something the streets don't always give. For some people, Kevon's death has become a cautionary tale, a warning about how long shadows can stretch from the past. For others, it's a reminder of how effortlessly the internet can flatten a human being into a single label. Snitch, gang member, rapper, victim. Labels are easy. Lives are not. And maybe that's the hardest part of all this, the tension between who someone was, who they were trying to become, and who people believed they were. Because sometimes reputations outlive the person, becoming louder than anything they could say or prove. As Kansas City continues to mourn, the investigation grinds on in slow, methodical circles. Detectives reviewing camera angles no one saw, retracing digital footprints, listening for the slip-ups that sometimes come months later. Cases like this don't always explode with dramatic arrests. Sometimes they simmer quietly until something gives. And until that day comes, if it ever does, Kevon Bifford's story sits in that uncomfortable space between tragedy and uncertainty. And somewhere in Kansas City, someone knows exactly what happened on that exit ramp.
exactly why Kevon Bifford's truck rolled into that car wash with his life bleeding out onto the upholstery. But in a community shaped by the very code that Kevon invoked when he refused to identify his own shooter back in 2008, will they ever speak up? Or will this become another unsolved homicide, another statistic, another story that ends without resolution? Let me know what you think in the comments section. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like